basking sharks are a fantastic species for us here in the UK. To have the second largest fish in the world swim around our coastline, it's a great opportunity. And again, something for citizen science. It's a species that, in the summer months, we do see at the surface. It's something the public can therefore be engaged in seeing. But it's also a species that the Shark Trust has had long involvement in securing protection for. I mean, we have to recall they were still commercially targeted until the mid 1990s. And, I feel that that's quite recent, but many people see it as the past, but it's quite recent. From sort of 1998 onwards, we saw an increase in their protected status through both domestic and European regulations, and then going out wider than that through CITES and CMS. Very much now seen as an ambassador for wildlife. And this is one of the conundrums we have with elasmobranch conservation, is that the majority of them are seen as commercial species, whereas we have a small handful that are considered wildlife. And very simplistically, I always say you don't eat wildlife, but you do eat fish. It's that whole issue as to how we take species across that divide. Obviously, basking sharks bring with them they can be seen at the surface. They only have vestigial teeth, so they're not sort of the big toothy specimens. They're remarkably charismatic as well. And so they make a fantastic ambassador, but it's not always as easy to bring other species that have equal levels of conservation concern across that gap, especially where there's been a historic commercial interest. So I would say we've got angel sharks across there nice and neatly, some of the other large charismatics that you encounter globally. But here in the Northeast Atlantic, species like porbeagle, for example, sort of sit in that mid space. They were commercially extremely popular, very high value food fish. But they're now, unfortunately, critically endangered species. They're heavily listed, and we need to see them given that full level of protection for population rebuilding to permit and to give them the space for that, a long-lived species. And yet, as they have historically been of commercial interest, there's often that reticence to see that species sort of move across that divide. And so we find that, how you reflect the management and conservation needs for elasmobranchs is always confused by the fact they are either targeted or wanted by catch in many fisheries, even though people may consider that they shouldn't be retained in that fashion.